Please join me in the first reading, which is Matthew 2, 1 through 12, and can be found on pages 1 and 2 in the New Testament in the Pew Bible. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we have observed his star at its rising and have come to pay homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them, "Where is the Messiah was to be born?" They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet. And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word so that I may also go and pay him homage." When they had heard the king, they set out, and there, ahead of them, went the star that they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road.
And if you're familiar with the scripture, we know what happens next is the slaughter of the innocents by Herod in an effort to get rid of Jesus. I'd like you to listen now to this parable from Jesus. It is familiar to many. It's in Luke 10. It's called the Good Samaritan. And listen carefully about what question Jesus is answering. Just then a lawyer stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he said, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus said to him, "What is written in the law? What do you read there?" The lawyer answered, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." And Jesus said to him, "You have given the right answer. Do this, and you will live." But wanting to justify himself, the lawyer asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" And Jesus replied, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell into the hands of robbers who stripped him, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, while traveling, came near him, and when he saw him, he was moved with pity. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, having poured oil and wine on them. Then he put him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said, 'Take care of him, and when I come back, I will repay you whatever more you spend.' Which of these 3, do you think, was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers?" The lawyer said, "The one who showed him mercy." Jesus said to him, "Go and do likewise." May God add God's blessing to these words to us this morning. Now, when I lived in Florida and was pastoring a church there, there was a cafe that was just down the street. It was a little place. It was called Diane's, and it could only hold about 25 people if we packed in. But they did a really good breakfast and lunch, and that's all they served, no dinner, just open for breakfast and lunch. And I used to go there with people from the church, and we would talk. And it was known as an incredibly friendly and hospitable place because if you'd gone there 1, 2, 3 times, and the waitress would know your name. The owners used to come out and chat and see how you were doing. And they decided that they would celebrate their reputation for being friendly and kind with a special T-shirt. On one side of the T-shirt, it said Diane's. But on the back, in big, bold letters, it said, "Because nice matters." In a world where rudeness and coldness and just plain nastiness seems to be getting the upper hand, nice really does matter. And not just nice, but gentleness, warmth, politeness. But most of all, kindness matters, because kindness is love in action. Jesus once told a story about this truth in a parable called the Good Samaritan we just heard. It's a story of 3 different men who were traveling on the road from Jerusalem to Jericho, and all 3 of the men, actually from Jericho to Jerusalem, and all 3 of the men encountered the same crime scene. Where's my water? There it is. But each of these men respond to this identical crime scene in different ways. One biblical scholar noted that these 3 men represent 3 choices in life towards others. He said that the first attitude is what you might call the keep my distance attitude. Luke 10:30 and 31 says, "There was a man going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when robbers attacked him, stripped him, beat him, and left him for half dead. It so happened that a priest, was going down that road, but when he saw the man, he walked by on the other side." This is a lifestyle of avoidance of other people's problems and needs, or a way of keeping distance from them. Don't ever get close to people and keep your relationships superficial, because, they might ask for help. And that would cause you to give up some of what you have, your time, your talent, something. The second type of lifestyle is called curious but uninvolved. Luke 10:32 says, "In the same way, a Levite came there." That would be like an elder. "He went over, looked at the man, and then walked away on the other side." This might be even worse. He walks over across the road, sees this guy lying there, helpless, naked, half dead, beaten, stares at him, and walks back to the other side and keeps right on going. Have you noticed it's a lot easier to be curious about other people's problems than to help them? We love to talk about other people's problems and failings. And in fact, an entire publishing business has been based on the fact that we love to read about or look at other people's problems, like the reality TV shows and all the great little supermarket rags. Why? Because we like to read about the misfortune, but to stay distant and unattached, aware but apathetic, curious but uninvolved. The third response is the response of the Good Samaritan, and this would be what deacons are modeled on. And this deacon, he got it right. Treat others how I would like to be treated. The Bible says in verse 33, a Samaritan who was traveling that way came upon the man, and when he saw him, his heart was filled with pity. If we want to grow in love, if we want to know how to build authentic relationships, then the Good Samaritan has something to teach us about kindness, love in action. In a perfect world, it sounds easy, right? We just pay attention and help those people who need help, just like Jesus does. But it doesn't happen, does it? Because if it did, the world would be a completely different place than the world we live in. Neighbor would share with neighbor. Hunger would be no more, and violence extinct. But the news of the day, any day, tells us that this is not happening. Why? If we look at our scripture from Matthew and the visit of the Magi, I think we might get some insight. After the hope of Christmas, the Magi come to offer gifts and worship the King of Kings. But what kind of king is born in a stable to poor people? a king who is completely different than the king of the day, Herod. One who would rule with love, wisdom, and might, not as a military leader, but one who would completely conquer those things that scare us the most: death, isolation, shame. Herod could not do that because Herod ruled with the threat of military might. He isolated his enemies and made them objects of shame. And once shamed and abandoned by others, they could be bent to his will, or if necessary, eliminated, politically, socially, even physically. The text from Matthew tells us that when the Magi told them what they were doing and what they were seeking, Herod was afraid, and all Jerusalem with him. Herod was afraid because he knew if the Good Samaritan ruled, he would be overthrown. Herod knew what every ruler knows, whether elected official, military dictator, or hereditary monarch. The ability to rule comes from the people. And there are just two ways to get the people to allow you to rule them. You use intimidation, violence, social isolation to create fear, disunity, and chaos. Or you promote peace, love, and justice to build community, stability, and hope. Herod feared the rise of one who would overturn his reign of terror by emboldening the people to resist and repudiate his ways. He feared the one who would convince those at the bottom, politically, socially, economically, that they were of value and worthy of more than what they were getting. It's hard to convince someone to be a slave or to work for slave wages if they think they are of value and worthy of better. So Herod thought it's best to nip this movement right in the bud, or the cradle, before the people heard the truth. Incidentally, it's the same truth that Moses told the Hebrew slaves in Egypt. You matter. Justice is for all. Rise up and follow me to freedom, and while you're at it, love your neighbor. It's the same message the Magi heard, and so they recognized Jesus and worshiped him. And it's the same message that the King of Kings has for us. And then he demands our total obedience. Now, obedience is not a popular word in any time. But in our time, it seems to be a particularly loathed concept. But to be the subject of the King of Kings, the Prince of Peace, the mighty counselor, every thought, every behavior runs through a filter of what would Jesus do? Every plan, every decision is brought forward in prayer to the King of Kings for approval. It means that we are subjects and bow down to the will of God. And what is the will of God? Peace, justice, mercy for all. How do we bring such an immense transformation within ourselves, in our church, our community, our world? It must start with banishing your pride, your selfishness, yourself as the center and top of the heap. It's the hardest thing to do, but you will never know God unless you do. This is critical. Did you hear what I said? You must put yourself second to God. Jesus must be the center of your universe. You must bow down and surrender your will to God's will, or you will never know God. This is what the wealthy and educated Magi did, the PhDs of their day. It's what the Good Samaritan did. It's what Moses did, and Peter and James and John and all the other disciples. It's what Saul, the scribe, did and became, by doing it, Paul the apostle. This is what you must do and I must do. There is no shortcut. There is no other way. You must surrender your will, your life, your money, your time, your talents to God. And until you do, you might hear the rumor of God. You might see traces of God, but you will never know God. You can come to church for decades. You can serve on committees and do good works. You can even become an elder, a deacon, a minister. But until you surrender your will and whole self to God, you will be, as Paul put it, a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if you continue to turn away from God and enshrine your own will, you could become Herod, enemy of Jesus and killer of children. When children are abused and killed, and it is allowed, it is a sure sign of a godless society and how far from God is leadership. The other choice is to bow down to Jesus Christ as your king, your ruler, your leader, and follow him and emulate his ways. The ways of peace and love, justice and mercy, just as Jesus illustrated it in the parable of the Good Samaritan. The Good Samaritan, a man so faithful, he refused prejudice and bigotry and helped someone from a group who despised him. A man who interrupted his life to sacrifice his time, to change tragic circumstances into wholeness and healing. A man who did what Jesus would have done, and Jesus describes his actions as the key to life. How do we start? Two things: prayer and practice. We must pray, and getting on your knees is not a bad idea. It reminds you exactly where you are in relationship to Jesus Christ. An old custom, maybe a good one for us to reinvent. We must pray and study the scriptures every day. I suggest to you Pray As You Go or the PCUSA Daily Prayer app, both of which are available on the internet and available for smartphones. I direct you to the church library right through those doors and the other double doors on the other side, and to little blue volumes of the Daily Study Bible by William Barclay. They provide you with a page or two, and I mean about that big, a page or two of commentary on every passage of the New Testament. For the more philosophically minded, a book of daily meditations on Scripture called Yes and ... was written by Richard Rohr, a wonderfully wise Franciscan priest. Look in your bulletin for information on these spiritual development tools and where to find them. The author Susan Kidd wrote this: "It happened years ago on a raw December day that make people wish that they had done their Christmas shopping in July. Snowy winds whipped through the street, and hunched on a bench was an unshaven man. He wore a threadbare jacket and shoes with no socks. He'd folded a paper bag around his neck to keep the biting wind off. A shopper paused, saddened by the scene. Such a pity, she thought, but there was really nothing she could do. And while the shopper lingered, a girl of about age 11 or 12 came along. She was wearing a brightly colored woolen scarf, and when she saw the man, she went over to him, took off the scarf, draped it gently around his neck, and walked on. The man felt the warm, still warm from the girl and soft scarf. Then the shopper crept away, wishing she had been the one put the scarf around that man's neck. I was that shopper," wrote Susan Kidd, "and God taught me something that day. Wherever I am, whatever I possess, there's always something that I can give: a touch, a smile, a prayer, a kind word, a good deed, refraining from saying something that will hurt or doing something that will hurt, even a scar. Let God teach you something this week and every week. In fact, maybe you might make it a New Year's resolution. Start by surrendering your life, your whole life to God, no excuses. Be brave and commit, for the rewards of those who follow this King are so worth it. Then resolve to get into your Bibles every day and pray every day. Lastly, put what you learn into action. Start with looking around and asking yourself, who needs my kindness? What unpleasant thing can I not say or do? Because nice really does matter in a world filled with hostility and selfishness. Try it from now until Easter and let me know how it works out for you. I think you will be amazed. Amen.